Hi, everyone. We have a little bit of a bonus session here today. We were speaking to our friends over at Toast. We spoke to the organization at Toast earlier this week, had a great conversation talking to them about the book, and we just kept on speaking, Meredith. We obviously didn't give enough time for Q&A, and the folks over there had asked us a bunch of really good questions, and we thought, you know what, let's answer those questions separately. So we thought we'd put a bit of time today to answering those questions. For those of you that aren't part of Toast, that are listening to this, perhaps your organization would like us and come to talk to your organization. So feel free to reach out to us at learn.delivery, and we can obviously speak to anyone that's interested in hearing from us. But let's get on to some of the questions. There were some good ones, Meredith. We're going to do it like this. I'm going to ask you the question, I'm going to get your view, and if I have anything intelligent to add to complement your wonderful answer, I'll certainly try. The first one is...
It feels like a test, honestly, Carl.
Well, in that case, you love a test. I know you're going to be fine. All right, the first one we got here is, with so many labor issues in fast food, how much of these jobs will be automated and how soon, in our opinion?
Yeah, so I think automation has long been a part of QSR. At Taco Bell, we called it productivity initiatives, which meant try to get basically more out of less people, right? And in order to do that, you have to enable those people with great tools and technology and processes. But long ago, it included things like centralizing meat cooking at manufacturing plants and then recooking via sous vide inside the restaurant. That was an initiative known as K- inside Taco Bell. We talk about it in the book. And now that the price of both hardware and software is decreasing relative to the productivity gains that it creates, the capability of software and hardware have gone up and the cost of labor has gone up. The math makes much better sense to start putting automation at the local level, right? So rather than centralizing it all at manufacturing plants, we can put it in the restaurant itself. However, I think we say often, Carl, that automation in restaurants begins with some pretty basic stuff, things like smart ovens, kiosks, software, very simple forms of labor automation, not outright replacement of humans. And I think full automation really requires smarter software and a massive upgrade of the existing restaurant infrastructure to more electric cooking methods versus gas, just like we saw in automobiles. So I imagine that future will take years to materialize here in the US, similar to the journey that we've been on with automobiles.
Yeah, well, we just finished recording one of our Monday Minute podcasts, and we talked about Starbucks and what they released, right? And the fact that they are bringing in something, as you announced on the podcast, an ice machine, an automated ice machine. But the point is that they have saved the time it takes from making a Frappuccino from 90 seconds to 30 seconds by just looking at the right type of equipment to service things like that. And I think it's these little small fractions of saving seconds in processes, whether it be in the creation of food or something else within the system, that has got huge amounts of opportunity for restaurants to take advantage of. And that obviously allows the restaurant not just to save money, but it also allows them to use what they have, their assets, in a more productive fashion, which therefore gives them the opportunity to sell more food, right? And that is where you want to then start talking about layering in virtual brands and the like. So automation drives efficiency. It doesn't necessarily drive cuts. And if you speak to the companies that are investing in this space, they're also doing a lot with regards to trying to improve the customer experience too. So I think everyone wins. The second question is, what are some of the impacts of delivering a digital restaurant on sustainability?
Well, the two biggest ones that come to mind for me are, as you have better software managing the food production process and inventory management, you have less food waste. And that's a great thing. We waste a lot of food in America. But delivery so far is a lot of packaging that is not yet recyclable or compostable, which is clearly bad. So what I like is that smart people are working on both of these issues. And I expect that we will see big sustainability improvements in the years to come.
Yeah, and I think you're finding that some of the more innovative restaurateurs out there are looking at the supply chain, thinking about how can you actually help sustainability from choosing where to get the food from those sustainable providers. In the book, we talk about Loop. Remember Loop Cycle and some of the trials where packaging was being either left outside the person's home to be picked up by the delivery driver, or being dropped off in specific hubs, and that giving the customer a credit in some way to a future purchase. So I do think there's some opportunities here for us to find ways to reuse packaging, and we'll see what happens from that. Okay, next question. What are the biggest challenges for large chain restaurants that have enormous menus making the transition to digital?
Yeah, so there was a lot in the news during COVID, and particularly during the supply chain disruptions and labor crisis that followed, about menus being trimmed and items being cut back. And I don't think this has anything to do with the digitization in the industry. In fact, I think digital makes it much easier to have massive menu proliferation. And the reason why is because the really smart chains out there that have a lot of items, think like your Cheesecake Factory, their cross utilization of ingredients is fantastic. And any smart restaurateur, independent or chain, is going to think through their menu matrix. What are the ingredients? What menu items do those ingredients go on? And be very, very selective about carrying ingredients that are what we call stranded or only used in one or two items. So I don't think digitization itself is really affecting menu proliferation and menu item proliferation, making it negative. I think it's actually going the opposite way, increasing how many menu items there are. Think things like customization at Starbucks, where the menu's essentially infinite, or virtual brands, where folks are taking their current ingredients and making new menu items and, in fact, whole new brands out of them.
Absolutely. All right, the fourth question, I'm going to take a stab at this one, Meredith. How does restaurant technology adoption differ across the world, or even regionally within the US? Well, we have a whole chapter of this in the book, of course, where we talk about the ways in which different countries have adopted delivery in different ways. And, certainly the most advanced countries tend to be developing nations that have what we call in the book skipping the landline, right? And they kind of go straight to mobile in that sense. And so without significant restaurant infrastructure already built, as we have here in the US, for example, they just go directly to more automation, more electrification, ghost kitchens and the like. So it's obvious that, to us, a 6,000 square foot single story restaurant and a sea of parking does not make sense from a land use perspective, but we here are stuck with them. So I think for me, it's more around how do you really think about how restaurant technology services each country based on its current infrastructure. But then similarly, where is the consumer in that? Is the consumer somewhat more advanced? When we look across to places like Asia, Japan, Singapore, the consumer demands even more from restaurants and retailers. And guess what? They get that. And so I think that's why you've seen a slightly more advanced representation of restaurant technology adoption in those markets. Meredith, a specific question for you. David mentioned you were previously at Taco Bell. Wow, what a surprise. We haven't even mentioned him yet. Did you visit the Taco Bell in Pacifica, arguably the most famous restaurant and tourist attraction in the town? For those not familiar, it's on the beach, featuring a walk-up order window for surfers and a solid selection of beverages, including a solid Napa Valley Chardonnay.
So, of course, I have been there. We have a visionary franchisee in the form of a man named David Grieve. By the way, he also built the Taco Bell at Harmon Corners in Las Vegas, where one can get married if one is so inclined. This guy rebuilt the Pacifica Taco Bell to make use of all its beautiful assets. It has so much going for it, like why not maximize it? So they did a great job there. They also built the Bungalow in Tiburon with Michael Minna. And I would say my takeaway from this, for those of you who work with them day to day, franchisees are generally amazing people, have their fingers in a lot of interesting businesses. And David and his development team at First Street are just top notch. And I think you should recommend First Street to any restaurant needing development services. I know I certainly call them when I do.
Wow. Well, my answer to the question is no, I haven't been there, but it sounds like
on the list.
Next question. What brands across both FSR and QSR do we see doing digitization especially well, and which do you see lagging behind? Well, I think you hear when we talk about the Monday Minute a lot, the names Chipotle, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A come up quite a bit. Sweetgreen and Wingstop, of course, are ones that we feature in the book as well. So clearly we hold those guys in high regard. but they have invested, right? They've invested heavily. But I think the difference between them and the rest is that they have visionary leaders. They have visionary leaders that recognize it's not going to be easy. They have a view as to where things are heading. They have a great pulse on what their consumers are thinking, and they go in that direction. The folks that are out there doing better, I don't know, Meredith, do you have any views on that one?
Doing better than those guys? I mean, that's quite a list. That's quite a list. And I think, you mentioned that they all built their own internal technology to a great extent, which they were able to do because their visionary leaders were so clear on where the future was headed. And I think I'm excited, as I think about what a company like Toast does, is bring that kind of innovation to everyone, even the independents, so that they're able to access some of the best things that many of these leading companies do.
Yeah. The next question here is, how should a restaurant thoughtfully balance between analog and digital solutions? When does digitizing the restaurant experience become digitizing for the sake of digitizing, which could place a restaurant in an overly vulnerable position when those digital solutions fail? It's like Danny Meyer said, right? No, it's not about technology for technology's sake. He put that on the back of the book. What thoughts do you have on this one?
So I do think most restaurants are very focused on ROI. So digitizing for the sake of digitizing is very unlikely. However, since they're so focused on ROI, chasing ROI to the dissatisfaction of consumers is a risk. So I think as restaurants think about pushing their technological innovation, they should always think about doing so with the consumer in mind, or increasingly with their back of house staff in mind.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. In a world where restaurants are understaffed, we're always trying to show how can technology provide that ROI you were just talking about. What is a favorite technology example of yours that easily integrates with almost negative effort from a busy restaurant leader? So a couple I think that come to mind. Pay at table, I think, is an obvious one. Just think about the efficiencies that can do for labor. Obviously, I'm going to be a bit biased here. Talk about juicer pricing with what we're doing with dynamic pricing, helping restaurants increase their margins by having more effective forecasts and doing that in a way that doesn't affect the operator and actually ultimately increases the customer experience as well.
Absolutely. So, just invisible to the operator, right? I mean, I think that's the amazing thing about it. Increase your margins without doing anything.
That always sounds like a good option. So
Yeah.
come and listen to us at Juicer Pricing if you'd like to learn more on that. Okay, and then I got another one for you, Meredith. What are your thoughts on kitchen staff who might benefit from digital solutions but maybe aren't technologically savvy or aren't allowed to be on their phone at work or maybe don't even speak English?
Yes. Well, certainly restaurants employ employees of all ages and all backgrounds. They are very inclusive places, and therefore the technology that is unleashed on restaurants to support them needs to be inclusive as well. The first thing I would say is that all interfaces and all training must be provided in the languages that you commonly find in kitchens. So English, of course, and then Spanish and Mandarin are probably the three biggies. And the great thing I find about technology today is that generally the UX UI is so intuitive that you might not even need language, which is really amazing. So if you can think about designing your products to be that intuitive as your North Star, I think you'll be well served.
Yeah. I'm going to paraphrase this next question. It's a very good one, but for all intents and purposes, the person asking was asking, what do you think would be the top 3 ways a restaurant would stand out amongst all others in the digital landscape? Website design, minimizing ordering clicks, food photography.
Well, I know, Carl, you talk about counting the clicks all the time, and I think that is hugely important. And it is surprising how many clicks it takes to get to the center of the lollipop, so to speak, and check out on the cart. So minimizing clicks, definitely huge. Food photography, I feel like, is table stakes, and yet we keep talking about it and pointing out people's terrible food photography. So I think it's worth saying again. But really, in terms of standing out, I think it's about making use of digital tools to do something that only digital can do, something that someone cannot do in person physically. And so the example that comes immediately to mind here is the veggie mode on the Taco Bell kiosk. But even thinking through how easy it is to customize on Starbucks, think of when Starbucks first came out, back in the 90s or whenever it was, they started rolling out nationally, and we all had to learn how to order a latte, and it was so hard. You could never remember, like, does size come first or flavor? I have no idea. And think how easy that is to do digitally now. Like you never have to learn how to say all those words. So
Absolutely.
anything that can be done novelly, differently, better, or more easily digitally, I think that's the way you really stand out.
All right, we've got 4 questions left. We're going to get them done in 2 minutes. Are you ready? Let's do it. As you discuss guest experience, to what degree do we think we view a guest's willingness to adopt customer-facing restaurant technology as a hurdle roadblock for restaurant owners to fully embrace the digital restaurant trend? I'll say this. Restaurants should always be looking to improve the guest experience. It's only their reason for being in business, in existence. And sometimes that's going to mean that restaurants will have to show customers why the new way is the better way. Question, what is this? I don't know, 12, 13 now. Meredith, from your point of view, what does Toast need to do to win the business of the Taco Bells of this world?
Well, first disclaimer, I am not speaking on behalf of Taco Bell, but what I would imagine
What?
is, yes, no, I talk about Taco Bell a lot, but I am not their spokesperson. They do not pay me. So I would imagine the answer is integration. So the big chains have so much technology in place already. They're not willing to wholesale replace it as they sub out this piece or that. So to win big chain business, Toast really has to figure out how to fit into the myriad other technology things that these big chains are doing.
Great. The next question, again, I'll summarize this one, is where do you see the biggest opportunity for companies like Toast to make an impact in philanthropic work? Any thoughts on that one, Meredith?
Well, last week, RBO released, Restaurant Business Online released a really in-depth study of addiction in restaurants, which I thought was an extremely important piece of work. Certainly mental health is one of the most important issues in our country right now. Something that my husband and myself are personally very passionate about. I think something that we should hopefully all be working to address. And restaurants are not alone in facing this struggle, but the statistics came out and restaurant workers are more likely to be struggling with addiction. So I think that is a really rich area where any nonprofit, including Toast, potentially could add a lot of value.
Great. And last but not least, we have a question here saying you mentioned that being welcomed by name in the independent sector, and that's part of what makes it so special without losing that personalization. What are your thoughts growing brands and how they can maintain that in a way that doesn't feel so AI driven, but is warm and genuine? Look, I love this question. I think it's a great one. I think it's about how upscale restaurants are going to use tech to augment humans, right? Not replace them. How are they going to use data to better understand the customers that they are about to serve? And how can tech also help the customers even think about coming to the restaurant in the first place? The experience still is king. And so any ways in which technology can help is going to be great, but ultimately it comes down to empowering and training your staff to be able to give that great experience too. Okay, we are out of time. Hopefully that has answered everyone's questions. Thank you again to Toast for having us. Again, if your company would love us to come and speak to your employees, your team members, we'd love to be able to do that. But as ever, thank you for listening, and good luck to Toast in the years and months ahead.